today's episode is a little different. Today we are remote. So our guest is over there in Canada. She comes from a dance background, of course, and is now in cheer and has been in cheer for like 16 years. She was an athlete, then a coach, and now she sits in the judge's seat.
Yes.
She hails from Canada, and you know her from TikTok. I'd like to welcome to HITSZN, Judge Mimi.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing so great. Super excited to be part of this.
We are so happy to have you here, and we just act like you are here. It feels like you're right here in our studio, so welcome to HITSZN. Let's go ahead and get it kicked off. Everybody's super excited probably to watch this episode. So let's talk about, where did it start? Where did your beginnings of cheer begin?
Yeah, I started in the equivalent of college. We have this little thing in Quebec called CEGEP, which is kind of the end of high school, just before university. Is a 2-year turnaround school and transition to go to university. And it was in the era of Bring It On. So I was during that time, I had finished my dance background, and then Bring It On was super big. And there was a cheerleading team in my CJEPs on my college. And I was like, you know what, I want to join the team. And that's what started everything. I was just like, I had this in my mind that I needed to be in cheerleading, that this was the new phase of my life. And so I auditioned. And like, funny story, I actually didn't make the team the first time. I got cut. I came from like dance. I was like very thin and frail, and I didn't understand like my space in the air or my space lifting people. I'm pretty tall, so it was really hard to like understand what I could do and how I could get there. But so I wasn't picked on the team. And then I just decided to train really hard. This was something that I felt was supposed to be in my life. And so I went to the gym, I hired a personal trainer, I started training and gaining muscle and learning more about the sport. I was coming to every single practice. It was in the time where alternates weren't a thing, but I was there as like an alternate. I was like, I'm going to be here. I'll be your water boy if you need me. I'll do whatever you need for me to be here. And so through perseverance, I finally made the team. And that just kicked off everything else. It just like went down the road of, I got a scholarship to cheer at university. I started a program in high school that had one team. I was there for 5 years, and I built it to 4 teams. I started judging at that time. I started training. I started doing judge education. And then it just like snowballed from there into like what is now Judge Mimi.
It kind of is funny that you mentioned the movie Bring It On was kind of this inspiration, but it almost sounds like it became your mantra, like, no, bring it on. Like, we're going to do this.
Yeah.
You took on that whole persona of cheer. That's amazing.
Yeah. Like perseverance. Like, I don't take no for an answer. Like, no for me doesn't shut a door. No is the beginning of a conversation, I find. And so through people being like, oh, no, you can't do this, I'm like, let me prove you wrong. Let me work harder. Let me like show through my work ethic that I can be here, that I can be in this room, that I can be of service and help this team. It was very clear for me that coming from like an individual dance background, that the team aspect was something that I really valued and wanted, and that I felt like this like, I'm a social butterfly, so like this, I felt really in my element there. And I was like, you need everyone on the team. Like, if someone wants to be there and has the right like attitude, like they'll find their way. And that's pretty much what happened. Some people like didn't have the right attitude. They might have been stronger than me, but they weren't like as passionate.
Mentally there.
Yeah. And so that just created a space for me. And from there, now that you're in the team, you're growing even more and your skills are like just developing. But it was during the time where cheerleading was associated with football. Like, our season was exactly the same as football, over summer and finishing in November. There was one championship. Routine were like 5 minutes long. Like, it was just like another world.
5 minutes
5
long.
minutes. That's like a whole weekend worth in one routine.
Exactly. The routines were much slower. There was a lot of we would move in between section, like the running with the high elbows and knees. Like,
Wow.
It's back in the days. It's been like, I've been in this industry for 20 plus years. And so, but quickly, like I have a passion for education and teaching people. And so quickly I became a coach for a younger team, and like cheerleading was exploding at that time in Canada. So even though I was in university, school programs were just starting. So there was an interest from girls and boys and athletes at that level, and they couldn't find coaches. So it was good, like money opportunity, but good also teaching opportunity when you're in college to be like, hey, it's 3 to 6, 3 days a week. Then I have my weekends, I have my nights, I have like so many other things. And so a lot of us that were part of these teams that I was part of are still in the industry. Some own gyms, some are on the judging side, some like started even production company. And so it's kind of this like one team that just and grew the sport in Canada.
That's
That's
incredible.
amazing. So I'd love to hear a little bit more. I know we're going to talk a lot about obviously your day job of judging, but before we jump into that, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the differences of, Canadian cheer versus kind of what we know the Hit Zero audience kind of knows as the American All-Star. But what is it? What was the difference? What was that like kind of exploring different avenues?
Yeah. Well, I was saying like I'm really passionate about education, but I'm also really passionate about learning. I think it goes both ways. You learn, then you want to teach. Like it's kind of this circle.
Absolutely.
And so being in cheerleading, like being a judge for more than 16 years, you start in a position, then you're like, okay, I feel like I've like learned this panel position quite a lot. And then you're expanding either into other panel position or other system. And so that's how it happened for me with the US. When I moved to Vancouver, we're really close to the border to Washington. I'm like 45 minutes to Washington State. So it's like really easy for me to come over and cross over. And so it's a bit of an adjustment. Like Canada was divided a little bit in like the early 2010s, where some competition were judged on the varsity system, but the previous varsity system where everything was like 9 out of 10, and there was a bit of a range there. And then we moved to the comparative system, which is the ISF system. Cheer Canada works on the ISF system, which is the system used at Worlds. And so we just judge on that like day in, day out, every weekend, pretty much. But then when I went back to judge in the US, it was very easy to be like, oh yeah, I've done that in the past, right? Like more of the rubric, more of the like a bit more set score. It is two different philosophy, and I find that it's easier to transition from a fully comparative one to a rubric one where you have more guidelines, and it might be a little bit easier because you're more controlled. So if you understand like how you place people in range, it's easier to do the transition that way versus the opposite way. We see a lot of people maybe in the US or in the UK that are trying to judge on the comparative system, and the first season is a lot of adjustment because you cannot pick the same number. Your range are much bigger. You go from like 0.5 difference in pyramid that you can give in between all of your team to 20 points. And then you have to justify
Yeah, we've
it.
heard about that. So we've had a couple coaches. We've actually had some conversations earlier, even actually in this week and last week. We have some coaches that we're friends with that have international teams under their program.
Yeah.
And some competitions here in the States are using that international system. And it was like this big topic of conversation of, okay, well, it's like 100 and I think 15 points or something like that.
150. Like 50.
150. Yeah. So 150 compared to like the 100. And, there's this translation here. So it's funny that you bring that up because we were just talking about that not too long ago. So you have all this experience, not only with Canadian side and the US side, but you also have experience in, I think, 3 other systems. Is that correct?
Yeah. So some of the judges judge like the North American season only. So that would be, let's say, October, November, early on to maybe April, May. I judge year round. So I judge 12 months a year because I judge in Australia also. So Australia, New Zealand. And so that the seasons are reversed. So that allows me to judge, like I judge, I think 26 to 30 competition a year. That's like how,
Wow.
that's how much I am in this sport. And that's how much I love this sport. Some are virtual, some are in person. But yeah, so I do United and open scoring system in the US. I also do USASF and ISF comparative, which is the same as Cheer Canada. And then in Australia, they are in kind of a hybrid system. So they are closer to like a 2017 United scoring system, where there is a certain set of things that you need to do. So there's a rubric to enter a range, but then in the range, it's comparative.
Wow.
Wow. How do you keep them all straight? Like, how
Yeah.
are you? Because if it were me, I'd be like, oh, they look great. But am I judging it this way? Am I judging it this way? How do you keep all of that?
Yeah, it's practice. It's a lot of practice. It just becomes second nature. It's like, think of it as people that are maybe trilingual and speak like French, Spanish, and English. They're able to switch in between the different language. They're able to give you translation in between the two language, like how it's going to be. It is just cheerleading language for me. That's how I approach it. And so when I'm thinking in one language, I'm just like in one system, I'm just thinking about this system. In some competition, even we swap between systems. So we might have people on the open scoring system and then international team and then the United scoring team. So we might go in between the three, and you just have to be able to wear those hats. And when you're at it's easier to start with one system, obviously, like you start with one language, but as you're starting to like learn every single like system separately, you're able to then cross over really easily because the differences are understandable.
So you typically are focused more on deductions, is that right? Is that something that you are focused on across all the different systems, or is it?
No, I'm usually focused on overall. So
Okay.
overall was my specialty, coming from a dance background in choreography, showmanship, energy, like dance execution and difficulty comes really easily to me. But I'm
Sure.
certified in every category. I do a lot more AccuScore right now and like head
Hmm.
judging. So like overseeing everybody's thing, explaining also to coaches when they arrive, oh, why didn't I get this? And then looking at videos and breaking it down for them. See your hips here, like, and you have like a little pencil and you're like, it's not exactly a full turn. See how did she stop here? That's like 3/4. She didn't get credit. So a lot more explanation, a lot more guest facing moment. But I'm still on panel every other day, pretty much.
So let's talk about that. You just said a hot topic that we wanted to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
Judges and coaches, AccuScore. When those
AccuScore.
three meet at the end of a routine.
Yeah.
Walk us through that process, because I think a lot of our parents, we see a routine, and of course, as a parent, it was the best routine we've ever seen in our entire life. There was nothing wrong. That should be a 99.9. We're going to win this whole thing, and we're going to get summit championships, and we're the best, right?
Mm-hmm.
You probably heard that before. So that's not the case. A routine happens, and it's very fine, critiqued, and then coaches will watch the playback with their teams after they're off stage, and they find things after they get the score sheet, and they have a certain amount of time to be able to come back to the judges and rebut, I guess, or there's probably a term for that, but to go to AccuScore and say, I disagree, I want to look at this. Can you walk us through that process from a judge's perspective of what happens in that situation? Because I think a lot of parents, they'll walk by the judges and they'll see one of their coaches or program owner there, and they think, uh-oh,
Yeah.
they didn't agree with something.
What
But they
happened?
don't know what conversation is happening. So why don't you guide us through, what does that conversation look like?
Yes, absolutely. So I think I'll backtrack a little bit. So when judges are judging routine, I think it's important for parents to understand that there's 7 people that are looking at their routine and giving you score. Those 7 people have each a specialty and a lens that they're looking your routine as. So they're going to look at only what you're doing in building, and then somebody else is only going to be looking at how you're doing your building skill. And then same thing for tumbling and overall and your deduction, your legality. Every single one of those judges have like a set of like blinders and guidelines on the routine that they're looking at. They are not looking at the routine holistically and then giving you a score. They have like a set numbers of things that they're looking at. And then those 7 judges scores aggregate and become your final score. At AccuScore, there are some categories that are reviewable. And so things like your difficulty, your legalities, your deduction, you can come and get clarity on that at AccuScore. But other things like execution or overall score, you cannot review. These are a bit more subjective, but we also trust that a judge is going to look at all the routine in the division the exact same way. And so if they're being really punitive, then it's going to be for every single team. And if they're really being like really lax and like really everything's great, it's going to be the same for all divisions. So we're trying not to like go and like change those score. But then the difficulty score on the open scoring system and the united scoring system is something that should be known by your coach before you get to a competition. It is something that is tangible. You have a set of rules. They're telling you exactly what needs to be in your routine. You need 3 elements of your level made by X amount of people to hit that exact score. And so when coaches are building routine, they're usually building routine to maximize those points so that they're scoring the highest they can, right? And so if something was missed, for example, there's a stunt in the back we forgot to see, like we didn't see it, there was tumbling in the front and then it kind of got missed, you can always come to AccuScore and discuss it. So things that AccuScore that could be reviewed would be we missed something in your difficulty score for tumbling or building. There's a deduction that you want to review the video, or you think maybe it was a bobble, it wasn't a fall, or you want to make sure that you've seen it properly. So deduction, and then legalities. So understanding, like mainly understanding how to make this legal tomorrow is like the main thing that we're doing here. Like we're explaining, okay, you need an extra spotter, you need to change the grip, you need to make sure she's not under or adding people. So like really getting that clarity on those legalities. So those are kind of the 4 things that we're reviewing. But when you get to AccuScore, if I'm reopening your routine, so if I'm reopening your video and looking at it, if I catch something that wasn't caught on the previous thing, so you have a fall and it was behind, and now I see it because we're reviewing your video 2-3 times, I'm gonna add it to your score. So there's always this like
risk versus reward.
Yeah, this like like the risk reward, like that the coaches have to do, where they're like, okay, like I think like I've watched my video and I think they caught everything, so now let's go and ask for a question. And they're seriously, the conversation at AccuScores are just that. Their conversation, their explanation. Like we want to make sure that the judges got it right. And so if you're coming to us and being like, hey, actually you missed a thing, I'll be the first one to be like, you know what, you're so right, let me add it on, like very like apologies for that. And that might be my Canadian self being like, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, like we'll change it for you. Okay, have a great day. And then like really good explanation on legalities, because you don't want this to be something that keeps on happening week in, week out. And like the legalities are worth so much, like they take so much point out of your final score, that these are just the thing that you're trying to avoid.
Absolutely. We ran into that this last weekend, our competition, we had a legality, and it takes out so much. We were like, oh my gosh. So I'd love to hear a little bit more from the perspective of, maybe you're only focused on tumble. Maybe you're only focused on pyramid. Maybe you're only focused on the building. What is it like when you're just looking at one piece of the routine? Are you, obviously you kind of have the script to follow, what should be happening. You're obviously watching what's happening, in front of your eyes, but how do you really only keep those blinders on? How does that work when you're actually in the moment?
Yeah, it is. It's not as hard as it sounds. I would say
yes, it sounds very hard to me.
Oh yeah. So like, but the thing is like, it would be harder to look at everything. When we judge on the ICU score sheet, every single judge is looking at everything, difficulty and execution for every single category. And like getting to that point of being able to catch everything and write notes on everything and remember everything is a really big skill set. And so being able to start off with one thing. So I'll take tumbling as an example, but in tumbling difficulty, when I'm doing tumbling difficulty, I'll be looking at numbers and what they're doing. So I'll be like 6 back handspring plus 3 back handspring step out. And then they're like, I'll be able to like just type this in. But then if you ask me like exactly how the execution was, I didn't have time to look at body position because I was like, there's 3 more girls starting this way that I need to know what they're going to do. So then I'm finishing a pass. That was a layout, and then I'm going to the other pass, right? And it's the same thing if you're looking on the other side. If you're only looking at building execution, you're looking at not building, tumbling execution, sorry, you're looking at body shape. So the shape of the body, is that what we're looking for? Timing as the team. And you may not know, okay, was it a back handspring, step out? You probably like may not like fully like remember exactly all the little things, or if someone didn't throw, because you're looking more on the holistic view of like those shape and the timing and the sink and the feet and the where are the ankles as compared to like the shoulders and so on. So it's
Was it a ripple or were they just all off time?
yeah, so it's just much easier to just look at something, and then at one point, because you're not scoring the other side, like as you have to type in your note, you almost just forget about it. You're like, when building arrives, then that's at that point. If I'm tumbling, I have time to go back and like I'm like, okay, there is -1 here. Like one person didn't throw her back handspring, and I can like finesse my notes, and then whoop, they get out of their pyramid, and I know something else will happen that might be something that I'll be judging.
So that I can relate to that, because when I'm at competitions and I'm filming,
Mm,
I used to take the approach of filming the whole routine and then pulling into different spots, right? But I've taken a whole new approach at the end of last season, the beginning of this season, and I'm taking the good parts. Let's just call it what it is. I'm taking the good parts of the routine, the exciting parts that people want to see in a video. So I'm looking at stunts, I'm looking at pyramid, and I'm looking at tumbling, maybe a jump, and then a little bit of dance just for fluff at the end. But I'm looking for the best tumbling pass in the routine. I'm looking for the best stunt that's going up in the routine with the highest, difficulty level. So I can agree with you, and I can relate to that once you go into that, not looking at a whole routine and going, okay, I'm just looking at certain things. It's funny. A lot of people I'll stop, or I'll be done and I'll get out of the coach's space or whatever. And parents will come and be like, what did you think of the routine? Did it look good? And I'll be like,
hard to say.
the pyramid looked good. And so-and-so's jump was awesome. And the back handspring to layout, that was great. They're like, what about the whole routine? I'm like, I didn't see the whole routine. So I can definitely relate to that. It's interesting. So I have a question. Why do most judges have iPads, and what are they being used for? Are they recording?
Yes, they are. So for reviews, there's different ways to review a routine. Sometimes on the computer there's another tab with like your replay of the routine if you need to go back and count. Tumbling is a great example of that, where you're like, wait a second, did everybody lay out, or is there some tucks in there? Was that all like double full, or is there single fulls? Back handspring, like fake tuck, people that just jump and like
Yeah.
hold their knee. So like just being able to go back and like the replay on the computer is fine, but I think judges are just more used on the iPad to be like, you press your own thing, you're in charge of your own filming, then you stop it, then you can go right back to like scroll through. And we're just more used to that scroll through, I think, is just like habit. And so
It's your own instant replay.
yeah, instead of being like, I'm typing my notes, I need to go on another tab, then go check, then like scroll there, then go to another tab, then type my notes again, then come back to my tab and keep going. You can just be like, okay, and then you still have your notes here, and then you type it. So some people are like to just have their own material and trust in what you have, because you never know if the system's going to go down. And then you're like, what is it? I don't have a replay. For some teams, I do need a replay. So it's like, it's those things where
Right.
like they would rather have their own material. So it's they can trust in what they know.
How long, when a routine ends, and I think this will tie into our next question, how long, so a routine ends, they finish, they get off the stage. How long from that moment does the score be completed, typically?
Yeah. Okay, so it depends. I'll give you a couple like different. I feel like I'm always
Yeah.
saying it depends. If you're on the comparative system, it might take a little while for your scores to go out, because obviously we're comparing you to other teams in your division. So we're holding like the first 5 team before we start releasing anything. So that takes a little bit longer. In terms of the United scoring system, it's a little bit faster. You're trying as a judge to keep on the pace of the event. And so we take a lot of pride in running an event on time and not waiting for judges. That would be like everybody's worst nightmare. And so we're like, we keep on pace with the event. But if there's two panel, that means that when one team is going, I'm watching. When the other team is going, I'm typing my notes. And then when the next team comes in, my notes needs to be submitted because now I'm looking again, right? I'm right back to this. And so if I'm unable to finish my note then I need to find a time in that like 3 minutes on, 3 minutes off thing where I'll need to go and submit the other team. So we're trying to stay within, usually that's 6 to 8 minutes from the start of the routine to submitting your notes. So 30 seconds to come in the floor, 2.5 minutes routine, 30 seconds to come out, the other team goes, 30 seconds, and then your score should be submitted. So that's another thing that people need to keep in mind. It's like, it's
no wonder they add so many breaks in.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
So do you typically see a judge that stays within the same, they're always a tumble judge, they're always a stunting judge, or do you guys move around?
I see a lot more judges that pick a specialty and that feel really comfortable in their specialty. And that goes with, like, we all have expertise, right? So like I came to cheer from a dance background. Some people come from cheer from a tumbling gymnastic background, and that might be easier for them to be like a tumbling judge then, because they're seeing more things. Their eye is just more used to seeing those like mistakes, those shapes that we're looking for, and so on. People are really passionate about like stunts. They might want to be a building judge. But yeah, we see a lot more people that are keeping in a specialty, mainly also legality. It is such a separate world to know every single rule, know how they apply, and know the little different things about the rules. But then as you're growing in this industry, if you want to be booked more, being able to judge multiple categories is going to be something that is a good business decision so that you can be a bit more versatile. And if you're hoping to get to AccuScore, you need to be able to like sit in every single one of those judges' seats so that you're able to explain anything at the AccuScore table.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so good to get perspective, right? We always talk about on the podcast perspective, and that was our whole goal with HITSZN, is to bring perspective to our viewers from all different lenses, from a judge's lens, from a coach, from a program owner, from an athlete, from a choreographer. There's just so many different lenses you can look at cheerleading holistically from. And so it's really interesting to hear, because obviously at the end of the day, we all want that score. We all want that score sheet. So question for you would be, do you think score sheets should be given to parents at the end of day one and the end of day two?
That's a really controversial question. I'm gonna say this should actually be a gym's decision, because it's gonna depend on the culture of the gym, in my opinion.
Yep.
Is it transparency? Sometimes too much information for a parent can become overwhelming. They feel called upon, doing something like, what should I do? But also like it is the coach's decision. I think it's like a pendulum. On the one side, if they know everything and they're trying to be too invested, it might be a problem. On the other side, if it's a black box and they don't know what's happening, they don't feel invested, right? And you need your parents to actually want to support and love the sport as much as their kids do.
Right.
So I think there's just a right middle that is different for every single gym, of educating parents and bringing them into the fold of what cheerleading is, but also maybe not having every single comment. It's hard for a parent to understand why we lost 0.1 on difficulty over here. If you don't know the rubric that much, you're
right.
You're just why,
Why did we lose 0.1? I'm so angry. I don't know why.
Yeah. And sometimes it is a coaching decision. I have a scoring seminar for parents on that, but I go through scoring decision where it's actually, if we were to add this difficulty, it would endure our execution so much. We would lose so much point in execution that we decided to take that 0.1 in difficulty, knowingly, that our execution would stay the highest and we would like have higher score here. And so that's
It's
also
that
like,
balance.
it's the balance, it's the holistic vision of this that is sometimes hard. So I would say pendulum, like don't straight like print all of your score sheet and give them to your parents. I think that could like become very overwhelming as the gym and as a coach to know that this is happening, but definitely sharing it with your kids, like the
Yeah.
athletes on
For
the
the
floor.
corrections.
Yeah. And
They need that
oftentimes,
information.
exactly. And oftentimes, like what the judges say is what the coaches have been saying this whole time.
At practice.
But
Yes.
just hearing it from like the judges, then they're like, oh, like, it's just different words, but we're like saying the same thing. The essence is there. And so I find sometimes this will help you as a coach to just be like, it's not me that said that, it's judges.
Straight legs and pointed
Yeah.
toes.
Oh,
How
I've
many
never heard
times has
that.
that been written on a score sheet?
What is it like when you're writing those comments and you know that potentially the child is hearing them,
Mhm.
the parent is hearing it, the coach, I'm sure, is hearing it. What is it like writing those comments and knowing that, the way that you say things, how does that translate? What does that feel like for you to write something that you want to be conveyed, but not being too harsh? Or maybe sometimes it needs to be really harsh.
Yeah.
How do you work through that?
We're like, my strategy is first, like, remember that all those athletes are children's. Like, that's one thing that I find that can get lost. Like, mainly you're looking at those
Yes.
senior teams and you're like, those are like athletes and, professional, and they're not. They're like high school
They're
students, right?
kids.
They're kids. And so, like, remembering that and putting that in perspective first is really important. Also, making sure that my comments are general in the sense of like the majority or most of your teams should try to do this, instead of being like Sally Sue in the front left needs to change XYZ, right? We're a
Mm.
team sports and we're looking at everybody as a team, and uniformity is a big thing in cheerleading. And so we're trying to like maximize that uniformity. So I'm not going to point out like individual, but then I also pick my language over the time. I develop kind of ways of framing things, like continue working on things, and then I can go XYZ, or there's an opportunity to blah, blah, blah. So that I'm framing it in the way of like, instead of like continue working on pointing your toes and blah, blah, I wouldn't write your toes were all flexed and it looked ugly, right? It's like, we're saying like, there's ways to say stuff, right? And it's
Yeah, you're essentially
professionalism.
talking. Yeah, and you're essentially talking to the kids, but at the end of the day, you're trying to convey to the coaches, hey, coaches, this is what you need to change to increase your score. But it's kind of like that boat, right? Going down the river and it's passing by some people. So you got to make sure that it can pass by gracefully, but it also needs to get to its final destination, which is the coach, to be able to make those corrections with the
Yeah.
kids.
And as you do more competition, I started building myself a vocabulary sheet. And so there's stuff like where I go like low, medium, high, for example, for range. And I have like synonyms of like good, average. Like I just have like a bunch of words there, and I have a full
That's
sheet of
awesome.
things
It's
that I'm like,
amazing.
for example, the continue working on. I, instead of using that a million times, I have like other words there on my sheet that I could look at, and it would be maintain, like just other words that I can use so that I can like bring it like, we can be like, I'll bring you perspective here for a second, but sometimes judges are on a panel for like 12 to 14 hours a day. Like we are there from the first team to the last team, or only breaks are awards if there's awards. And so sometimes when you're at like your like 11th hour of judging, you need that refresh of words, of different things, like framing it differently, challenging yourself to like um writing comments that are different. And so having that vocabulary sheet just like spiced it up for you and just brings more life into what you're doing.
Breaks up that monotony, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the teams at the end of the day can start to feel it as well. They're like, oh, these judges are tired.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not. If we are professional and
Yeah,
have like all of our tool, no one like we would judge the first team like the last team.
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Ooh, like city wise. Um, you know what? I've been loving Australia. I find that there's a lot of commonality with Canadian culture. And so I go there and it just feels like home. It's just a strange thing where, like, I think if I had to move anywhere, I would probably move to Australia. Like, Perth is amazing. So is Brisbane. Like, there's just so much in those cities. And I'm a surfer. So obviously, like, I go there and I'm like, I can like judge a competition and then go surfing the next day. Like, that's lovely. It's so great. That's been like a really good one. But then in terms of like, let's say I've seen a lot of competition and like one of my favorite competition that always blows my socks off every single year. It's a competition in like a suburb of Montreal that is called Kicks Celebration. And every year they do a theme and they go all out. So, for example, they did a theme on like, it was like under the sea. They had the Little Mermaid that was there for a award. The spotters were dressed as stingrays. There were like bunch of like decor. Last year was disco. The people that were
Wow.
doing like the MCing had full afros and flare
Like
pants,
full
full
out.
out. And then this year it's gonna be Mario Bros, like the movie Mario Bros, Mario
Oh,
Brothers.
Mario
Yeah,
Brothers. Yeah.
sorry. I'm so it's
Nope.
they're gonna do like
Little
this whole
translation there.
like
Yep.
Mario Kart like theme and so on. I'm
Yeah.
Yeah.
so excited about this competition. I've judged it for 16, like since their first year, and it just evolved into this massive competition. There's like 15, 20 bids for Worlds at that competition. Is the last weekend that you can get a bid. Like it is awesome competition. Really, really great.
So we actually have ambassadors. I have 17 ambassadors, 18 ambassadors. I'm starting to lose count across the United States, but we also have presence in Canada. She is just outside of Montreal. She's in Ontario, and she is, I think she's 12 or 13. And so she has given us a lot of perspective and input about the differences between both competing in Canada versus competing in the United States. And something that she's brought up is she said that the compete level in Canada is much different than the compete level in the United States. She said that sometimes when they come to competitions here in the United States, the compete level seems to be a bit higher here in the States, and that they always strive to, obviously get their bid to Summit and to come to Summit, and they find it so exciting because of that compete level. Do you find that the compete level is different beyond like the different countries, whether it's Australia, the United States, Canada, and all the other countries that you've been to? Do you see a difference in compete level?
Um, Not really. And I'm gonna like I'll bring you perspective on this one. I think
Yeah.
the US will never know how good they are until they start competing internationally. And so right now,
Mm,
Hmm.
Worlds is US World and then the rest of the world. Summit is
mm.
US Summit and then the rest of the world. And so my perspective is you guys don't know how good you are until you go into against those international teams. Like in Canada, we have like world champions multiple years in a row, like Flyers Karma, Great White Sharks. Like there's those teams that are like multi-year world's winner back to
Wow.
back to back. And so for yes, of course, like maybe I find that it is more competitive on the lower level in the States. There's more of that
Okay.
culture of performance at a younger age. But then when you get
Hmm.
to those levels 6, 7, and open,
Gloves are off.
like I'm like, I don't know if I would say I see things in Australia and like it is the best cheerleading I've seen like all year. But because for them to like fly to NCA a full team or fly to Summit a full team, first it's off season. Their season starts in February. And so to say that they're going to be February 28th at NCA National with what team? Right? Same thing to say that
Yeah.
you're going to have a world's team in April. Like, how? Right? It's
Right.
just the season's upside down. So, like, they have to do their full year. They go through summer with that team and then they go and compete.
Wow. So they're bringing it out.
Yeah. And so you have like really, really strong team, but then the price of coming to the US to compete is very different. But then, like, I see their cheerleading and I'm like, there are some gyms there that will like eat you out. They are like, I'm sharing videos of them on my page and I'm like, they are good. They are really good. But it's just the exposure. Like they don't come
Mhm.
to the US that much, but they're like outperforming a lot of people there and elevating the cheerleading level in Australia and same thing in Canada, you know?
That's amazing.
What is it like, when you're talking about, oh my gosh, they're an incredible team. What is the buildup of that? We just discovered this for ourselves. We're in the Southeast, and so our routines are fast, and they move fast, and they're all, they're
Hmm.
always constantly something's going on. But then we went up to the North, their routines are much more precise, they're much slower. And then I've heard the West is kind of the same. What is it like that really, no matter where you are, that really creates that, oh my gosh, they are an incredible team?
Yeah. I think for me, I would say like really good precision, like really good synchronicity as a team is one thing that like always hits. I would rather have like an easier routine, but so think the execution is really strong. The lately I've been really into body energy. I've been finding that there's a lot like people that are performing with their face, but then their body is like doesn't have any
There's no life to it.
yeah, it's like there's no projection of
Like
energy
shark.
coming from it and so on. And those teams that have that confidence, that are able to look at the crowd in the eye and look around, are just teams that you're like, wow, they're so confident. Like they must know what they're doing, right? And so that for me is
Yeah, and
kind of
it
the two
brings
thing.
and they look like they're having fun. I think when you add that element of a team that can not only go out and execute precisely, but the look on their face is like, I'm just outside enjoying the day. I'm having a great time and I'm going to put on a show for you. And
Yeah.
they're so comfortable in their routine. They're so comfortable in their position and their skill as a full team that everybody shows up, does their individual job, which then, correlates to one routine just executing so nicely. It's a lot of fun to watch.
You're touching
It's a
on
lot of fun
something
to watch.
so important, teamwork, like trusting your teammate. Like we see often on the judges stand teams that let's say may not trust each other and then they're like, come on this side. Like like if they don't know their routine, over here, you're here, come over here, right? And we see that, but the teams that can like walk backwards while facing the crowd and don't have to look behind and just know that they'll hit their spot and no one's going to be in their way, that has like so much value. The team that can hit difficulty and make it look like it's nothing, that is also like ooh, loving it.
Chef's kiss.
Yeah.
So my daughter and Erica's daughter, they both cheer on one common team. They're both crossovers, but they cheer together on one team, and they've cheered for my daughter's whole career. They've been, and her daughter's been my daughter's back spot. She's a flyer. And we talk a lot about trust. We talk a lot about trust individually with our athletes. We talk a lot about trust together as both of our families. And something that my daughter, her name is Zoe, every time she gets ready to go on for whatever routine it is, she's so funny. She's 9, but she's going on like 17. So she makes me spray the bottom of her shoes with hairspray. She makes me spray the back of her legs with hairspray so it gets tacky for her like bases and back spots. And she looks me in the eye and she says, "Okay, I'm ready." And then I look at her and I say, "Zoe, do you know what job you need to do?" And she said, "Yes." And I said, "You need to go execute your job and you need to trust your teammates that they're going to execute their job." She said, "I will." And then I look at her and I say, "I'm so proud of you. Go have some fun." And she said, "I will. I love you."
I'm
And she
getting
goes off.
goosebumps. This is
Yeah,
so
I know. I
good.
start to like tear up every time. She's been doing this for 3 years, and every time I do it, I get teared up. And every time she hits the stage or she executes something in the air, I get teary-eyed. It's so amazing to just watch them perform. To your point earlier, they're kids, they're children,
Yeah.
and they're doing things that I'm an adult. I could not do those things.
Yeah, that's it. When's the last time
And
you tried to back bend?
Well, we have this tumble track in our house, and they made me try it about a month and a half ago, and I'm still recovering, I feel like. But back to the trust piece, her daughter is Zoe's back spot, Hayden, and there have been times where the bases and front spot kind of fall apart, and Zoe is being held up by her ponytail, because Hayden is no way in any shape or form in any circumstance going to let Zoe hit the floor.
Yeah.
And when you see that trust bond between a flyer and a backspot base or whatever, or if you see the trust between all of that stunt group and then even the whole team, it's magic. Would you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you can
It's
feel
magic.
it. Everybody in the audience can feel it.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me watching teams kind of come out is when they just know that routine. There's no, they can they're counting, they're doing their thing, but it's almost like they can do it with their eyes closed. Yeah. And I think that makes all the difference in the world to just have that and know that your team is there. So moving on to kind of a fun little question, less about scoring, when you're there, you're kind of embracing the experience as a judge. What is that like that for you to watch? Are you watching other teams? Are you enjoying the cheerleading aspect of it? Or do you still stay so focused on the score? Are you able to truly enjoy a routine?
Yeah, I find that when depending on the position that I'm on, like sometimes I'm like, if I'm just tumbling or I'm building, like I may be looking at my thing, but when I'm on the overall chair, what I really like is that I'm able to look at the routine end to end. And sometimes I finish the routine finishes and I catch myself being like, "Ooh, I had goosebumps on this one. Like this was so good."
Yeah.
Like they have so much potential. They're like doing so well, and being able to be on that like score sheet that I'm able to give that feedback to them and like reward them for that is really great. We are a fan of cheerleading on the stand. Like everybody is there because they love the sport and we have a job to do. So we cannot like fan over anything, but mainly I get to cities where I don't know anybody. And so like at one point, like gyms are passing by and I'm like, wow, like this gym really surprised me. Like every single one of their team are really good. Like who's this gym? Never heard of them. Like what? And like, so it's like I'm being surprised every weekend by teams that I've seen before, new teams that are doing things that I'm like, I've never seen this before. I need this video. Like I need to find this video online. So
Yeah, I want to watch that again.
Yeah, exactly.
So I can tell that like your education to people and your ambition to just share your knowledge and your expertise in cheer, but your overall joy of cheer is permeating. It's permeating through the screen as we're looking at you. I feel like we're in person. How did that take you to TikTok? Because everybody knows and loves TikTok. Is it your willingness to you want to share your information with as many people as possible? Tell us about the deciding factor of, hey, you know what? I'm going to give this platform a try and I'm going to share what I know.
Yeah, it was actually out of need for me. Um, so being from Montreal, I had a big cheerleading community in Montreal. I had teams and coaches. Like I was coaching, I was a judge. I had like this whole community there. And then I moved to Vancouver 12 years ago. And when I moved to Vancouver, cheerleading is much smaller here in Vancouver. And I didn't found that community right away for me. Like I was judging, but I wasn't coaching. And I wasn't being a member of the community because I didn't have those connections. And so it came from the desire. I was like, I have no one to talk about this to. It came from this exact desire of just being like, I have no one to talk about this to. And I have so much, like I would watch a video on TikTok of cheerleading and I would be like, I want to send it to someone because this is awesome, but I don't know who to send it to. And that was like the part where with my husband, I just had two children and he was like, cheerleading every weekend. Are you sure? Like it's a lot for a family, blah, blah, blah. So there was a little bit of cheerleading is a hobby. And I was like, no, I feel like cheerleading needs to be in my life. And so, yeah, I just started sharing. I watched video and then I just started doing duets where I made myself like side by side on the video and just shared my impression of what I was seeing. I was like, oh my God, I really like this. Okay, so this is like a comment I put on score sheet and that's what it means. And I would circle stuff and I would be like, this is exactly what we mean and so on. And it just like caught on fire. It started from me being like, I have no one to talk to about this to then I have this like 40,000 people community on TikTok, and then 40,000 again on Instagram that are just like there and willing, and they care and they love the positive aspect that I'm bringing to this, and the perspective a little bit like you were sharing of this. But it just started out of like, I have no one to talk to about this. And so
That's
the
incredible.
internet.
That's incredible. And well, now you have between the two platforms, 80,000 people to
Yeah,
talk to. So that's
exactly.
great. You went from 0 to a whole city. So
Yeah, and it
that's
reconnected,
incredible.
like it reconnected me with people in Montreal that I had, that
That's
it
awesome.
was part of my community. But when you move away, sometimes you just lost touch. But now I'm like
Yeah.
much more in touch with like that community. I've extended my community to like the world. Like now I can go to Australia and have like friends there, and I can go to any city, and I'm like, oh my God, there's this one person, like we chatted on the internet. I would love to meet them in person. And so like I'm doing random stuff. Like I was in Kansas City in November for work. So my regular work, because this is not my regular work. I also have a full-time job. And so I was in Kansas City for my regular work, and I had a day off, and I just posted like, hey, is there any gym that would want to have me come around? Like, come and pick me up and I'll come to your gym. And so next thing you know, I'm in the cheer mom's car that I've never met. That is the first time I meet her, and she's bringing me to a gym somewhere in the suburb of Kansas City. And then I spent 3 hours with like two worlds team and the summit team, and we cleaned our routine. We did a bunch of things, and like that would never have been something that I would imagine, without this community.
That's incredible.
That's amazing.
It's really incredible to see how those connections work. And we've seen something similar, and we are by no means at the scale that you are at, but it's one of those things where I found that I was at cheer comps and no one was recording videos. I mean, varsity was doing their varsity TV, which is great to be able to review routines, but to be able to see your athlete in a more, greater light. And that's kind of where the birth of HITSZN Media came from. I really wanted to showcase these athletes that the skills that they are bringing every weekend and every day at the gym, they have to be highlighted. Like, this is incredible. And so I made it my mission to make these videos to show people this is what cheerleading is. Not just getting all gussied up and going and dancing around and shouting for a football team. It can be that, but there is a whole other side of it called All-Star, and there's just so much that needs to be highlighted. And so when I started HITSZN Media, I really wanted to not only just make it about making great videos, right? I wanted to provide something back to that cheer community. And so something I sat down was talking about with my wife of what are the core values? Like, what do I really want to do? Because when you create a platform, as you know, when you get yourself a platform, you can do two different things with it. You can really spread positivity, or you can really let negativity creep in and it can permeate. And we have enough of that in the world and on the internet, and combined, we don't need any more of that. So I decided that with this platform that I'm trying to build, let's spread some positivity. And one of the hot topics that we're really trying to go against is this whole body image and this whole body stigma that we see in cheerleading, that you can't be a 5'9", 160-pound flyer. Nope, that's not a flyer's body. A flyer has to be, 65 pounds, blonde hair, blue eyes, and completely rich. That doesn't need to be the case. What is your perspective on helping combat some of these negativities, and not necessarily in cheer, but really just in kind of this athletic community? How do you find ways to bring positivity to these different areas and spaces?
Yeah, I always say cheerleading is one of the most inclusive sport because we need everyone. And so whether you have individual skills, whether you're like small or tall or strong or flexible, we'll need you. And so that's always been my approach. And like I coach introduction to cheerleading classes for like 5 to 10 year olds. And so like I know the importance of also making every single position important and valued.
Yes.
And so it's not just about like the flyers, it is also about the bases and the back spot and everybody on the team being able to be there. What I personally try to do in those introduction to cheerleading classes is when we do stunts that are with only two people. So let's say a nugget and someone's like stepping on them, or like a T lift, like a regular lift. I will try to put people that are of the same like height or like weight-ish. Like I'll try to like pair those kids with someone of their of that resemble them so that we can do everybody can fly. So that we can do like we can have one person is a flyer, the other one's a back spot, and then we switch. And so this one, everybody's getting the opportunity. But the reality of this sport is that as you're becoming more and more competitive, specialization is really important and becoming like a very comfortable in the position that you have. So for example, I was a base and becoming a really good base and knowing your technique and muscle memory and building that is so important for the team. And so I think it kind of goes twofold, making sure that everybody understand that every single position is so important. And then on the other side, being inclusive to we need everyone. You need the tall, you need the short, and everybody understanding that cheerleading is that inclusive. You know, it's not like volleyball, you need to be tall, you know, gymnastics, you need to be small. Like it's just they're kind of these things, but cheerleading, we need you all. Like everybody can come
we
and
always
join.
say instead of to be able to look up, you got to look forward first, right? And with the flyer would not be in the air without the bases and back spots below them. And so it's a cohesive unit, right? It's not just the flyer in the air with a string above her head holding her up. Otherwise, you know, that's Cirque du Soleil. That's a whole different realm. But yeah, it's an interesting situation, and we're just trying to do the best that we can to provide positivity into the sport as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, you know, there's so many athletes out there that are genuinely, like you said, whether they're a flyer, they are trying to crush their flying, flexing, their, you know, all their classes, their bases. What are some things that you would recommend, you know, if you are a base or a back spot? What would you recommend? Is it strengthening? Is it more conditioning? What would you recommend to see those bases and back spots really lean into their ability?
Yeah, definitely. Like strength is really important. But what I've seen as on from the judges' stand is that sometimes some of those bases and back spot are probably the best performers. And so you can own facial expression, showmanship, body energy in your transition, in your individual skills, getting into your stunt, that mat talk, be let's go, we can do it. Like you can own that, whatever your position is. And that is not different from being a flyer to being a base. So it goes with confidence. It goes with like you know, being able to be like, okay, everybody's important. We're doing this together, teamwork, like bringing people together.
Showmanship.
Yeah. They can own a lot of different other things. And yes, of course, like being somebody, an athlete that we can count on is super important. And you can have your moment to shine. You may be a spotlight in a transition, and that's your moment, you know? And then that might be like, yes, we're looking at the flyer, but that might be the moment we're like looking at you and like you have your things, you know?
I love it. Well, we have a segment in our podcast. It's called Questions That Hit Hard. So any of the questions you thought we asked already, those are the easy ones. Now we're moving into the hard ones. It's actually kind of ironic because they're actually the fun ones, just kind of the day-to-day. So it's going to be a rapid fire between Erica and I and yourself. Don't overthink it. It's just the first one that comes to mind. And they're very lighthearted, day-to-day kind of questions. So I'll start off first, all right?
Okay. Favorite hotel brand? Where are you staying?
Man, wherever they put me, I'm not in charge of picking hotel. I'm not like they send me a booking link and I'm usually like, okay, that's where I'm going. I don't really
favorite activity to do on the airplane?
Working.
Okay, we touched on this earlier, but favorite state?
State?
Yeah.
In the US.
Colorado.
Ooh, good choice.
That's a good choice.
Good choice. Do you, when you get to the hotel, do you put all of your clothes out of the suitcase and put them in the drawers, or do you keep it out in the suitcase?
Oh, no, suitcase. I'm a suitcase person.
Yeah. I used to be like that, and then my wife was not, and then we started traveling together. And so now I'm kind of like, if the hotel is great and we're going to be there for a long time, I'm in the drawers. But if I'm not, totally suitcase.
Yeah, the reality is
I don't
that
ever take anything out.
it's like we usually travel on Friday. And then we're at comp
Right.
Saturday. Sunday we have to check out, and we're usually flying out on Sunday. So for me to take anything out, like I'm taking stuff on a chair to make sure it's not too wrinkly. That's it. Everything else is like, I'm like, when I undress at night, I re-roll it, roll pack so that it's ready to go, so that I can sleep
Yep.
longer and just get out, close the luggage, and move out.
2 things in, 2 things back out.
Yeah.
That leads into my next question. So, when you're judging, are you opting more for comfy clothes or are you looking more business casual?
Business casual. It's also usually asked of us to be business casual. There is like
Oh,
a uniform or like a dress code that we have
yeah.
to follow, and so every competition is different. Even though we're like in the dark on top of a panel, I don't know who sees us. If it's asked of us to be business casual, we're going to be business casual. Sometimes colors, like brand colors. Um,
Mm.
yeah, we were at World Cheer Co not a while ago, not long ago, and their brand color is black, white, and purple. And so the panel was all black, white, and purple. It was super fun.
That's cool on brand. Favorite comp snack?
Popcorn.
That's a new one.
That
We
is
have
a
not
new
heard
one. We've
popcorn
never
yet.
heard
Dippin' Dots is
popcorn.
obviously a huge one. We've heard chicken tenders. We've heard
Yeah,
all sorts
but
of fun
hear me
stuff there.
out. Why, like, so because we're on panel for 14 hours, if I start eating sugar, I'm going to crash and I'm still going to be on panel and I have to do my job, right? So I'm trying not to eat too much sugar. And then same thing with too much carbs. So like fried food or so on and so on. If I eat the fried food, I'm going to crash also like later. So I'm trying to sustain my energy, and food is fuel. So it's like veggies, fruit, like protein, like we're trying to stay in that and trying to reduce sugar and carbs so that I can like be alive 14 hours later and still like my brain is still like functioning. And I find that popcorn might be that like spike sometimes that you need.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So, a lot of times we're reading the score sheet, the parents, the coaches, and, we're like a tenth of a point, a this of a point, and they're like, that's a shimmy, that's a smile. What would you say to a parent or a coach or a child, an athlete? What really does make up that little? Is it really just a shimmy or a smile, or is there more that goes into it?
I think like the shimmy and the smile is pretty accurate. Being able to be connected to your routine for the 2.5 minutes, like all the way through in your transition, when you're dismounting, when you're moving from A to B, and still being like connected and not like I'm performing, then I'm like walking to another position, then I'm performing again. Like being able to go end to end is what makes the biggest difference.
Mm.
What are your top 3 tips that you could give from a judge's perspective to parents on comp day?
Be there to support your children. I would say cheer them on when they're on the stage. Find one parent that will film everything and then airdrop it.
I knew you were going to say
Like,
that.
find
You,
one.
you're telling me you don't like this?
No, I no like phone over your head. I'm like it doesn't allow you to like the magical moment for a parent in competition day is being able to make eye contact with your children when they're doing
Yes.
something they love. And you're missing out on that like a special moment where they're going to look at you and be like and you see that their eyes are going to like oh it's my mom in the crowd.
There's nothing better
there's
than that.
nothing
No.
better and you're missing out on this if you're on your phone or if you're like not fully present. So I would say be loud, be proud, make that eye contact. One person films like the shy dad that has like a really good like HD cam, like put them on the side and then he's gonna take care of this. And then everybody else just be there. And also like you're here at the service of your children. So don't add more stress. Like you need to do good. You need to like no pressure. There like
That's awesome.
just execute what you have to do. You've practiced so much. And then at the end of the competition, I would try to reinforce the positive things that happen. What was your favorite part of this competition today? Like, what was the best thing that happened off the floor with your friends? Like, reinforce that love of the
I
sport.
really like that question. What's the best thing that happened off the floor? I like that
Yeah.
because we worry as parents and the kids worry and the coaches worry and everybody else is in between worries about what happens on the floor, like on the stage, what's happening there. That's a really good perspective. What is your favorite part that happened off the floor today?
Yeah.
I like
And
that.
you're there for like
Parents,
5-6
ask that kid.
hours. It's like, it's not just a 2.5 minute routine. There's other like 5 hour and 50 something minutes that you have to like fill. It's like, what happened during that time? Who'd you play with?
Yeah, I love that.
I do too.
So this has been such an amazing conversation, and we just appreciate your time and not only your wisdom and the opportunity to educate our viewers, both coaches and choreographers and parents and us, with your knowledge that you've gained over all of these years. It's been enlightening to learn more about like the judging perspective and just ideas, what you see up in, I call it the crow's nest, what you guys see from the crow's nest down, because we're always looking this way, and then sometimes we'll do one of these.
What are they thinking back there?
And that was my biggest question, was like, why do they have iPads? And I'm like, are they really recording with those iPads?
Yeah.
And I guess you guys really are recording with those iPads. But no, I really just thank you for all of your time and your wisdom. I hope everybody is going to enjoy this episode. I know they will. If anybody does not know Judge Mimi on TikTok or Instagram, please go and follow her. She'll continue to fill your bucket full of wealth and information and knowledge within the cheer world. But Judge Mimi, thank you so much for joining us on HITSZN.
Thank you so much for having me. This was great.
Thanks everybody for joining us on this latest episode of HITSZN with Judge Mimi. Again, please go to TikTok and Instagram and follow her. She has so much information that she can give to you in the cheer community. And until next time, we'll see you on the mat. See you later.